what are really the biggest pieces blocking NEMT business from going national the same way that AMR and these big ambulance companies have gone national?
If you get in with, just say, HCA here in Nashville, they're all over the country. I mean, they got 1,200, 1,300 facilities. You get into one of those, I mean, you're set.
Dominic, I want to get back to this piece you were talking about earlier about TNCs, right? So like a lot of broker companies, like including, the one you're at now, you'll contract with Uber and Lyft and whatnot. The ambulatory work in the NEMT industry, like how much has that been taken over by TNCs like Uber and Lyft? How much is it getting taken over? Is that extending into anything beyond ambulatory?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a big shift, right? Because it's more of the on demand. I think that's the biggest thing with Uber and Lyft, because they have such a big networks in certain locations that 5 minutes you have a ride, right? You come out of the hospital and you want to go back home, in 5 minutes the Uber's waiting for you. But again, I think is a certain niche for Uber and Lyft, and then there's a certain niche for a true TNC. Uber and Lyft, curb to curb. I mean, you're looking for people that can walk to the vehicle. They're not going to help you at all. I think they play more of a role today in the healthcare and also in transit because of the availability and on demand that they are. The taxi exempt that they have today, especially on the transit side, because they don't have to be drug and alcohol tested, because 2 or 3 years ago, they came out with that rule, because a lot of transit agencies were having problems getting riders to and from their destinations. And again, Uber came in and said, we'll do curb to curb. We'll put in, 5,000 drivers in this location. And if you need to pick up in 3 minutes, we can do that. There's a lot of discussions going around that now, because a lot of FTA has realized that's not usually the safest way to go, especially with the population of people that are seniors or have disabilities that need a little bit more help, getting to the vehicle. Uber and Lyft are doing a lot of different things. I know they got into the space, but again, the other piece of that is, with Onward and all these other TNCs out there who do a little bit more of the credentialing, a little bit more of the hand holding, door to door, door through door, is a needed function, right? It's a needed level of service. And so with the next phase, as you can see where Uber is now going with the autonomous vehicles, you can see Waymo doing it. You can see the robo-taxis coming out. I think that's the next phase in our industry. And it's coming fast. I mean, we even see it in RFPs today. They're asking for either electric EVs or they're asking for autonomous. And so I think Uber is now kind of doing a little bit angling in that, doing a little more pitching of the autonomous. And so it's going to be interesting, because when you're talking about autonomous vehicles, there's no more driver, right? And so where are all these Uber drivers going to go? They're not going to have, a job, unfortunately. And so it's just going to be interesting what the future looks like with that.
Are you seeing autonomous vehicles already in RFPs for NEMT rides that are ambulatory?
I see the autonomous vehicles in some paratransit and some transit contracts that are asking for that technology. And I think the pitch from those companies right now, we can do it without a driver, and they think they could be more efficient because they have routes. And so again, it's just going to be interesting, how that future kind of builds out. But we know it's coming. I don't know how far it is from coming, but you hear about it all the time, right? You hear about Uber, you hear about Waymo, you hear about May Mobility, you hear about Beep down in Florida. They're all autonomous and they're coming hard.
So if I'm an NEMT business that does a good amount of ambulatory trip volume, like, do I need to be worried about Uber and Lyft moving further into my territory and autonomous vehicles potentially?
I don't think so, because again, there is certain levels of service and certain niches that a lot of the levels of service that you just mentioned kind of fall into, right? And again, with the autonomous and with Uber and Lyft and all those futuristics, I think the landscape will change a little bit, but I don't think it's going to change dramatically to the point that a lot of providers are going to start losing trips to an autonomous vehicle or to a typical ride share. I still think that people are still going to use wheelchairs. I still think that people feel more comfortable in those vehicles, and it's just going to take some time. But eventually, like I said, I think the industry itself is going to be shaped differently in the next couple of years.
Yeah. I just get a lot of folks asking me, like, hey, every ambulatory ride in NEMT, I mean, it seems like any vehicle can do it, right? It's ambulatory. It's curb to curb. It's someone who can walk on their own. Like, why is that even NEMT? Like, why isn't Uber or taxi or whatever doing all those rides?
Great question. I think because of it depends on if it's a consumer to consumer, Uber and Lyft are just fine, right? But when you're talking about higher level of service, you're talking about people that want to get and feel good getting into a vehicle that the driver has gone through drug and alcohol testing, going through those credentialing. I think it just, peace of mind for that patient and also peace of mind for the facility that's ordering that ride. Because you're still liable for that person until they, get to their destination. And so, and it's all about reputation, right? I mean, if you own a big health system or if you own a big nursing facility, and unfortunately, something happens, for them on the route, I mean, that's your name. That's the company that's transporting them, their name, that's insurance. There's just too much of a high risk in order for, to put on somebody like that.
Yeah. And that's a bar that, Uber and Lyft and whatever TNCs cannot meet a lot of the time. So
correct. I kind of miss those days sometimes, just working with the ambulances. But again, a lot of the ambulances now have consolidated, like AMR is consolidated, Royal Metro is gone. All the big ones are kind of gone. You've got Ambulance out there, but the ones that I used to compete against here in Nashville, they're all gone or they've dialed back. So it's interesting. It's different now, but back then.
When you said they're gone or they've dialed back, like they've just gotten acquired by larger ambulance?
They got acquired by a lot of ambulance systems. A lot of Medicaid and Medicare have cut back their reimbursement rates. So a lot of them had dialed back. Like they used to have 20 vehicles and now they only have like 10. So they dialed back a little bit. So that was one of the things that happened. But again, most of them consolidated. Like AMR and Royal Metro used to go back and forth. Like at the one point, I was over the whole state of Tennessee. So I had Knoxville, I had Chattanooga, and had Nashville. So I used to go to Knoxville and walk into University of Tennessee Hospital and say, hey, we want to do you want to use us? We're here. We have like 8 ambulances. So like, no, we use Royal Metro. Or, hey, we use AMR. And so they used to battle for 911 contracts. It's lucrative. Those 911 contracts are lucrative because they get a step, right? So they get money every month. If they're doing 10 rides or if they're doing 300 rides, they're still getting whatever that amount is that they want per month.
So, I mean, is it even a thing these days to start an ambulance company and grow it? Or is it like, hey, you know what? These national ambulance companies, they're so dominant now that it's not even worth it to try to start an ambulance company.
Yeah, it's not worth it anymore. I mean, those national companies have everything. I mean, there was a couple of companies that tried it, like what Priority's done a little bit. Like there was a lot of people that obviously when Royal Metro closed, a lot of those leadership people went over to another company they formed Priority. And they just were able to get some contracts back, but not a lot. I mean, there's not a real lot of business anymore, I guess you can say, for the ambulances. Now, we have an ambulance out in California called Royal Ambulance, and we're associated with them. And they started about 10 years ago, and they have about 90 ambulances in California. But they're always looking to expand too. But again, it's all about, the reimbursement, how much they can get back per trip. But the other thing is, because of COVID, a lot of these driver pools have dried up, right? A lot of people don't want to drive ambulances anymore. A lot of people are not going to EMS school anymore. So there's been a turn that way, and to the point that all the hospitals here in Nashville were struggling big time of getting private ambulance companies to help them transport patients. So what they went out and they bought their own ambulances. So now HCA has their own ambulance, Vanderbilt has their own ambulance, Ascension has their own ambulance. But what happens there is they pay a little bit more in rates for the driver. So what happens? The private people now are not only hurting because there's a low driver pool, but now because the hospital is paying a little bit more, they're taking all those drivers. Now, mind you, these ambulances who are owned by these hospital systems are only doing their own patients, and they're only doing mostly into-facility. They're not doing discharges. So what happens is now they're depending on that private company to do the discharges. Well, because they've taken their drivers away from them, and the private people can't get their drivers, now those private companies are having issues of on-time performance getting those patients out of the hospital. It's interesting, and I don't know where it's going to go, but it's very interesting on what's happening in the ambulance world.
Well, I mean, I have customers that do stretcher gurney work and NEMT.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, yeah, like these facilities used to use ambulance companies for discharges, but now they use us. And like, we do it at a much cheaper rate than the ambulance company. Yeah. And like, the hospital wins, we win. It's only the ambulance companies that lose.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, like, is this like going to be more of a growing trend that NEMT businesses doing stretcher and gurney work take more and more hospital discharge business away from ambulance companies?
Oh, absolutely it is. Because if you look at it, the hospital is going to pay whatever they need to pay, right, to get that patient out of that facility, because they're trying to do turn and burn, right? So they want to fill those beds, empty those beds, fill those beds, empty those beds. And so when the hospital's looking at, it's going to cost me $300, $200 to get that patient out, but my new patient, I'm going to be able to get $500, $600, $700, $800, whatever, right, per day, and they're going to stay a minimum of 3 days. Then you got to kind of, the hospital has to figure out, well, the ROI on that is to get that patient out so we can fill that bed with a higher paying patient or higher paying insurance. So that's one of the things. But I think you got to make sure that you have the right people in place if you're doing those stretchers, right? You can't just put one person on there. You got to put two people on there, right? So now you got to figure out, all right, I'm paying two people. How many stretchers do I need to do in order to make money on that particular vehicle who's doing stretchers alone?
Yeah. But I mean, it's relatively easier, isn't it, to find people who can do driving and attending for NEMT stretcher gurney work than it is to find EMTs to be driving and attending to do ambulance work, right?
Correct.
Because I mean, the pay is just a lot lower for people doing NEMT work, right?
Correct.
This whole ambulance industry, like the way it's consolidated, I mean, why do you think the same thing isn't happening for NEMT?
Like some of the states have regulations against that. Like here in the state of Tennessee, you can do a stretcher run, but the EMS director has to come over and approve your vehicle, and then you got to pay a permit license in order for you to be able to do it doing the stretcher runs. And so sometimes that kind of is higher in some states than the other. I think here in Tennessee, you got to pay $1,000 each vehicle each year in order to have that permit. And then again, you have to have the EMS director come over and making sure that the vehicle is, ADA certified and making sure what kind of stretcher you're using, making sure that the tie downs are in there, making sure, all that kind of stuff. I think a lot of people don't want to go through that hassle as they think it is, but I think it's definitely a conversation to have with the health system for sure, especially if they're struggling with people that are sitting in the hallway on a stretcher for 6-7 hours. I mean, if you walk into Vanderbilt, they're on diversion all day long, and what's happening? That ER is being jammed up. They don't have enough people on the floor or enough beds on the floor because they can't get them out. So they go on diversion. So that means no more patients for Vanderbilt until they get their situation set. I mean, I used to walk in there and I used to see people lined up in the hallway on stretchers waiting for transportation.
That's because ambulance companies just didn't have enough drivers and the ability to service all that.
Correct.
And NEMT businesses just in that area hadn't built up enough the ability to do stretcher and gurney work at the time.
Correct. It's changed a little bit. I mean, Vanderbilt still goes on diversion, but they have their own ambulances now, right? So they got a pretty good fleet, so they can get them out if needed, as a backup. But I think the other thing is these NEMT providers, do they have that in their arsenal? Do they know how to speak to that, right? If they don't have, they go in and say, we can do stretcher work. Well, I mean, what does that mean? You have to have, somebody who wants to do that kind of work, but also has in their arsenal, hey, this is how I'm going to sell it. And some people don't realize that because they don't walk into these hospitals, right? Their drivers are going in there. But I think owners of a company should be hands-on. And I think they should be able to walk through these hospitals and see what's going on. It's plain as day. And then you have that conversation with the CFO or CEO or even the director of the ER. Say, hey, I can alleviate this kind of stuff. I can get these patients out. I can have 3-4 vehicles just sitting here waiting for you guys to say, hey, we'll have one going on at 10, 11, 12, and 1. Because the hospital, the doctors, the ER doctors, they're all doing their rounds. If they're not going to be admitted, then they can go home. If they are going to be admitted, then they have to wait in line. But again, it's knowing your market and knowing the clientele that you're talking to.
And I literally have some customers who do that. Like they run fleets of stretcher gurney vehicles and they say, hey, hospital, we will have some vehicles just dedicated to be sitting around your hospital and doing discharges for you. And I just wonder, I mean, like you're saying, it's, state regulations and ADA compliance, but you have these large national ambulance companies like AMR, and they've consolidated everything. And I get some folks coming to me and saying, hey, we want to start a national NEMT business. And I've had a number of folks say that to me over the years now. I've seen little execution on those kinds of visions so far. And I just wonder, what are really the biggest pieces blocking NEMT business from going national the same way that AMR and these big ambulance companies have gone national? And I guess a big piece of it is regulation, like you're saying.
Yeah, regulation, but then also having that relationship, right? If you get in with, just say HCA here in Nashville, like I said, those are the ones that have the 9-hospital system. They're all over the country. I mean, they got 1,200, 1,300 facilities, either hospitals or freestanding ERs. You get into one of those, I mean, you're set, and it's not a hard sell. I mean, again, it's just like what I just said, trying to get those patients out of the hospital so you guys can make money. So it's a win-win, and you don't have to wait a long time. I mean, obviously, because if they do meet medical necessity and they have oxygen or whatever, then you can't transport them with an NEMT. You have to go by ambulance. But I'll tell you right now, most of those people, if you do assessment on most of these patients, they can go by NEMT easily.
So then, if I'm an NEMT business owner and I have a fleet of let's say, stretcher gurney vehicles, maybe I do some wheelchair and ambulatory as well, but is it even worth it for me to have any ambulances in my fleet and any EMTs?
No, not ambulances. I mean, maybe an EMT, so they can be like the lead driver, but not ambulances are not needed an EMT, because Yeah, you're not, I mean, unless you're going to bill through insurance, but you have to have like all that stuff on the back end too, right? You have to have all that technology that's able to bill through the insurance, right? And then if you take medical necessities, then you're getting into, a whole different world, versus just doing a non-emergency stretcher because somebody can't sit up in a wheelchair for more than 2 hours or more than an hour or more than 15 minutes. So you put them in a stretcher, right? And you charge $120 or $140 versus what an ambulance would charge privately would be $700. So there's also that savings too, right? So
Drastic difference in those numbers.
correct.
I mean, it wasn't that long ago, Dominic, that like there were a lot of private small ambulance companies all over the country. And, just in the last, like since you started in this industry 17 years ago, like in that much time, like that's all gone and it's all consolidated. It's all just big ambulance companies now. Like, I don't know. Do you think in the next coming years, regulations are going to change that's going to allow the same thing to happen to the NEMT industry in any capacity?
I don't think so. I think there's not really a lot of national NEMT wheelchair companies out there. They're more like regional. I mean, you got like Wheelchair down in Florida, which is a big one. They do a lot of VA. You've got one here that does a lot of VA, but you don't have like any national players like an ambulance would have, because I think it costs too much money, right? I mean, I got people. So I've got a wheelchair company down in Florida that wants to get into Tennessee, and so I sent her all the recs, right? What you need to be and what kind of licensing you need, and you have to have brick and mortar here and blah blah blah. And she's like, well, this is a lot of work. And I'm like, yeah, it's a lot of work. I said, if you're dedicated and you put in all that money in order to be in an opportunity area, then you need to make sure you have business, waiting for you or have an opportunity for the business.
I still get people coming to me and saying, hey, yeah, we want to create a national franchise. And I mean, I hope someone is able to successfully crack that nut in the NEMT space.
Send them my way. I love to talk to them.
I will.
I'll give them some pointers.
Well, the national NEMT franchise is yet to be, and I'll send them your way so you can see them on the right path.
Yeah, whatever I can do. Run, baby, run.
Awesome.